One. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Bible and Archaeology Live. Bob, happy December.
Happy December, yeah.
Happy December. It's freezing outside.
It is like 16 degrees, 15 degrees.
It's warmer than it was yesterday because yesterday feels like colder than a number that shouldn't be around zero.
Yeah, that's right.
Or a number that doesn't exist depending on, I don't know.
So when they give you the two numbers, the temperature, and then with wind chill?
Yeah, and then the feels like is you shouldn't be outside, but have fun walking to class. If you are in Iowa and it's cold where you are as well, many sorrows for you. But the good news is I think there is a Hawkeyes basketball game this weekend.
Go Hawks.
They're doing so good. I don't know. We won't spend all the time in basketball, but if you've been around for a while, you know that we love Hawkeye women's basketball. So now that the season is in full swing, you must suffer through the joys that are Hawkeyes women's basketball. Because, man, there's a lot of good.
They're good.
A lot of good young players.
They're good.
There is so much. Hayden is going to be an absolute, I mean, already very good. But by senior year,
monster.
I cannot wait.
Monster.
But
take my class. You should sign up for my classes.
He grades very rigorously. If you are here for the first time with us, so happy to have you along. This is a Friday free-for-all, which is why it seems unhinged, because we're here to just talk and take your questions. I know there are some questions already in the chat. We got some questions sent in advance as well, so we'll be moving through some of that. And it doesn't have to just be a Christmas question. I know it's December and everything is Christmas all the time.
That's right.
But as you saw from our episode this week with Campbell Price, all about the history of archaeology in Egypt, December can be about other things as well. So we will be moving into, a full slate of Christmas content, let's say, but we have some other things too. So today, if you're here, throw a question in the chat. We're happy to have you along. If you are watching on replay and you're not with us because you're like, I working Friday at 11 or 11:30 is atrocious for me, there's always a way you can be in touch with us outside of these. You can join us on Patreon. We are Bible and Arc over on Patreon. You can leave a comment on an old live that we go back to. You can send us an email. You can leave a comment. You can do all kinds of things. So be in touch. But Bob, let's start with a question that we got sent in via email. Now, this question came to us from someone who had watched an old podcast. They watched our podcast on the sacrifice of Isaac.
Okay.
The sacrifice that got stopped or maybe did not get stopped, depending on how you want to read the text. And so in that, we were talking about how maybe there was a version of this story where the hand doesn't get stayed and instead comes all the way down on the individual. So their question is this, about Genesis 22. What are we to make of the juxtaposition of the Abraham of Genesis 18, who boldly challenges God by asking, "Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly regarding the innocent in Sodom?" with the Abraham of Genesis 22, who silently obeys the command to slaughter his own innocent son without objection? What representation of Abraham, the challenger of injustice, or the silent obeyer, does the text present as more desirable to God? And I think this is a wonderful question because it does pull on both, what we have in both, but the end of that. Which one of these is more desirable? Because it's not just about this whole do we have multiple Abrahams coming together? Which is more desirable to God? Where do you want to start?
So let me play. I hate the word devil's advocate, but let me play scholar for a second. All right, that question makes an assumption, and the assumption is that in antiquity, it's bad or it's wrong to sacrifice your own child, and that it's the equivalent of, now again, this isn't me speaking. This is me speaking about antiquity. Of course, sacrificing a child is awful. It's just the worst. It's awful. It's wrong. But in antiquity, it was not necessarily understood that way.
Right.
Okay, so when Abraham goes and says, "Do you punish the righteous with the wicked?" Would you punish all of these people in Sodom, but there's still 50, 40, 30, 10 righteous there? That's a legitimate question. That question has been asked about God, by the way, all throughout the Hebrew Bible, right? So you get it in Kohelet or Ecclesiastes. You get it. There's asked of this. They all go to the same place. It's all vanity, right? You've asked this moral question asked about God forever. That's a legit question. The idea then that, well, but what about the Abraham who just goes along and follows orders and sacrifices his son? That is looking through it through a set of eyes, not just modern eyes, but a set of eyes, even at a later point in antiquity where ancient Israel stopped sacrificing its children.
Yeah.
Where that was prohibited, that was banned.
Which is what most people say, like, oh, look, we have all these, do not pass your child through the fire, don't do this, don't do that.
Correct, but that was later. You all your firstborn belong to me, and then you get some verses that come along and say, except you can redeem your firstborn.
Except maybe don't really do that thing that I told you to do.
Correct. So what you have is probably, and I'm just challenging this assumption, is you probably have one and the same Abraham who sees punishing the righteous and the wicked is wrong, but an Abraham who is a righteous man, who if the voice, if the deity tells him, this is what I want you to do, it's your son, it's your child, it's your, I don't want to use the word property, but back then it's...
I mean, it is.
It is. So I will do with my child what the Lord tells me to do. Now, keep in mind, it was also very common to, when you're building a structure, to take your firstborn son and to, during the foundation of this structure, to sacrifice the child on the structure, to ask the deity, please bless the structure. And that was later replaced with foundation spikes. So a spike that was inscribed, and they would put the foundation spike. And of course, that carries on, I would argue, even down through the Masonic time, where they would do a sacrifice, or they would offer fruits, or they would, on the first stone, we have ceremonies today, the cutting of the ribbon or the laying of the cornerstone, the chief cornerstone, right? The laying of the first stone of a building used to involve underneath it the child, the sacrifice of a child. It was this period of time where your children, especially your firstborn, was sacrificed as if to say to the deity, if you're willing to give me this one, I'm going to give it back to you. And the assumption is now you're going to give me all this more. It's the whole principle of the first fruits.
Yeah, and Kipp Davis in the chat, hey, Kipp, great to see you. He has a comment in here. He throws excellent work on this, points to cultures still in modern worlds with high infant mortality rates to show very different attitudes toward childbirth and infancy, which is a part of this when we are reading these stories.
Right.
Where I was just watching a video this morning that was talking about shifts in infant mortality just within, from the 50s and the change of how many and what that results in. That this isn't something that is just antiquity.
Right.
It is not something that is just in specific areas, because as you can see from discussions of healthcare coverage in the United States, the state you live in can really decide what infant mortality might look like, or the health of the mother, that those things are still very precarious and dangerous times. And so there are some of those very modern impositions that we put on top. But it is an interesting question to ask between these two, right? 18 and 22, Abraham's father Abraham didn't just have many sons, but had many personalities himself and many different versions. Many versions of Abraham did Father Abraham
multiple personality Abraham. I like the question. I play scholar advocate right there, and I say maybe it's one and the same Abraham who debates punishing righteous versus wicked adult humans, but of course he's a righteous person because he will obey and sacrifice his own son. Now, as the story of the Akedah is received throughout the years, that's when I think all the ink gets spilled over why Abraham would do this.
Yeah.
Now, the reception history of the Abraham story, that's when you have problems with it. Why would he do this? Who just blindly follows this? That's where I think the rabbis get into this and start telling all the stories.
And this isn't just something that we have discomfort in Abraham if we're looking at literary traditions, because you can also look towards Greek traditions regarding Iphigenia. And does she die or does she not die? Do the gods intervene? So that same discomfort around the willingness to let our heroes sacrifice someone, their son or their daughter, and what that means is not something that's just unique to the reception history of Abraham. It's something that we also see there. So there are moves through time over not modern, but also ancient, of how are we feeling about this type of behavior?
Right. And we've done this in a video before. God stays the hand according to the story for Abram, but Yiftach in Jephthah, right? Didn't step in on that one. Now, was it because it was a daughter? Was it because it was a different time period? And then he gets skewered by the rabbis later on because he made the promise in the first place and then he didn't stop. But this was a custom. Sacrificing of the children in antiquity in the Hebrew tradition was something that was done until it wasn't done.
Right. And Kipp, some medieval rabbinic scholars seem to think that Isaac actually died. The author of the book of Hebrews might have thought it as well.
Yes, Kipp's
and this
right.
is something that Dr. Stavrokopoulou talks about in some of their writing, that this, if you're looking at these things, there feel like ways, and also, as we talked about in that longer episode, go and check that one out. I'll put the link down in the description. Remind me too. That there are some of the things, if you're just looking at, well, where does Isaac show up or not? Who gets screen time? Maybe he disappears. But it is an interesting one. It's a very fun one. So thank you for your question. And there's a lot of conversation in the chat around it. So if you didn't see that episode, go and look. And it might be something that we can return to in the future as well, about these broader views of children and death.
That's right. And thank you, Kipp, for jumping in, and good to see you at SBL.
Great to see you. Great to see you again. Happy to have you here. For all of you in the chat talking about temperature, it is freezing outside, but it's not, it's okay. We're inside. We're not currently doing this outside.
Go Hawks.
Would be a crazy way to do it. That would be a very,
I would think. Go outside and we should film one outside in the snow.
Film one in the snow, and we will do it until the cameras turn off because it is too cold. Maybe next
week. Or crack.
Or die. Yeah. So today we're inside. We got a question here in the chat about ancient languages.
Yep.
And as we are in a department, in a building that deals with ancient languages, they want to know what ancient languages are useful for the study of the biblical's cultural background other than Akkadian, Ugaritic, Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek. That feels like a pretty good starting point to say, like, if you're hitting all those bases, is there anything else? And I like that this is the cultural background, because you're not just trying to say in order to deal with the texts, but that broader view. Is there anything that you feel got left out of that?
I was always told in graduate school that the second most important Semitic language is German. It was because so much of the early biblical scholarship was written in German, prior to, let's say the 1930s, all of the early great scholarship was written in German. So go learn your German. But I get the question. I think you've got the list there, right?
I think another one that could be interesting if you're looking towards some of that, maybe not the cultural background of origin, but Syriac as something for reception.
For later, I was going to go with Persian, Middle Persian. Because it works its way into Aramaic. So if you're learning Imperial Aramaic, obviously Biblical Aramaic, I would say go learn Persian. I remember John Collins told me one day when I was saying, I was a young graduate student, I met him and I was like, oh my God, it's John Collins. This is the coolest thing. And I said, what languages should I be studying? And what topic should I? Everybody does Second Temple, and he goes, go learn Persian. He just said, go study Persian. That's where everything is going to go. And sure enough, look at all the archaeology, look at all the studies. Everything is going into the Persian period of Judaism.
I mean, it's almost like there's a lot of Persian period influences in the.
It's almost like John Collins knows what he's talking about.
Almost like he knows what he's talking about. I don't know. That's a shocker. I know. Breaking news, if you haven't heard before. So I think you got a pretty good handle on some of those. I would also say something that maybe not languages.
Right.
Not a languages thing, but thinking about SBL here, went to a nice session that was dedicated to Carol Myers and the work of Carol Myers. And
we love Carol.
An important part of their framework is looking at, we have text, but also where can we go for archaeology and for ethnographic studies, right? Trying to build that tripod out. So using the languages, on the one hand to try to have a textual description, but that's just the description of a couple people who are producing that. The archaeology of all of the regions connected to those languages is another. And then if we can, how can we get to some understanding of the way people lived for understanding that cultural background?
Right.
And that could be coming back through archaeology, but just moving yourself away from the temples and the big spaces to something else.
Right.
As another thing to throw in addition to what languages should you be reading? Because as you mentioned, a lot of the early scholarship is in German. And a lot of the early scholarship doesn't care about what people really did
right.
or how people really lived,
right.
which, as I talked about with Dr. Price, is one of those things for the future of archaeology going forward. There's the excavating side, yes,
Yeah.
but there's also all the time in the archives.
Right.
Because there's a lot of stuff that was in a dig report or filed away that maybe hasn't been touched because it wasn't on that big thing they wanted to find.
Right.
And so there's still a lot of stuff that you can do without having to break any new ground, that if you're interested in archaeology, just going through people's dig reports where you're like, nobody's talked about these things, or a massive misrepresentation, something that happens all the time with Expedition Bible, of what's in people's reports.
You mentioned Syriac. I spent the summer in Ethiopic. Now, I just brushing up and doing, because I was working in Jubilees. And so I was trying to work back. Now, so that's later, right? But that's part of the reception history, a lot of these texts. So that's another one. But I think you have a good list right there. Yeah. I would go from there.
We have a question here from Hand of Omega. Could generations of Israelites picking up souvenirs over centuries be why there is no evidence of the Exodus? What might we expect to find if true? Okay, so, on the one hand, right, underline of their question is that, yes, there is no evidence of the Exodus. Mm-hmm. If we are talking archaeological evidence for the Exodus here. We're not talking about the Bible as evidence for the Exodus.
Right. And again, we want to differentiate between, this is the old Dan Brown example I give. There's no evidence for the Exodus. There's all kinds of evidence for the context of the Exodus, just like there's all kinds of evidence for the context of these Dan Brown novels. Yeah. There's no evidence of Robert Langdon, right? So it's a historical novel. You have evidence of the context of the Exodus, but not of the Exodus itself.
Yeah, so the idea of them picking up souvenirs, I'm not really sure what you would mean by souvenirs here, because the things that, I think maybe, is this trying to say, like, we don't find anything that's connected to the period of the wandering because people picked it up over time? I mean, that feels like trying to find a solution for a problem that doesn't really fit.
Jody Magnus said one time, if you've got all these people wandering through the desert, if they're nomadic, you shouldn't expect to find anything, right? So I don't think she was given a defense for the historical Exodus, but she was saying, even if you have people walking through there, they're nomads. They're going to, it's not going to be there, and they're going to be picking stuff up. So it's kind of a moot point to argue. But I mean, that's the nature of the question, right? They're just going to be picking things up on the way, just like you do in the desert. There's not much out there to begin with. But the issue is, after you try to work through all of the internal discrepancies between the dating, when is this thing, who's involved, where are you going to get all these people from?
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, we have the receipts of the people who actually built the pyramids. They were Egyptians, low-paid Egyptians. We know where they're buried. We have all of these other problems that we have with the historical Exodus.
Because the other thing, like the thing you're not going to be able to pick up as a souvenir,
right? You
can't pick up a destruction layer that should exist to correspond with a conquest that's supposed to happen.
Right.
That's not something you can just remove. Now, there's ways that those things can be hidden if people are building and they go back through, right? There's ways those can move, but that's not a souvenir that you're picking up and taking along with you. So, yeah, that other part, though, as Jody talks about, with the ephemeral nature of the stuff they'd be leaving behind.
Right.
And this isn't someone put in there like chariots at the bottom of the sea. Yeah, nobody's picking those up. Also, that there aren't. And so, like, those aren't the things that we would have there. It's trying to find solutions to a problem rather than saying, okay, maybe this is the bad word that's a good word, cultural memory, right? Of various groupings of people reflecting a period of a confluence of events like the late Bronze Age collapse, where a lot of things change.
Yeah,
communities redefine themselves. See Eric Klein.
Eric Klein has some comments on this. He's written about it a couple of times. But the other thing is these things on the bottom of the sea. You know, first of all, please identify the body of water that they're actually crossing. I do this in cities that built the Bible. But just because you have something that looks like a wheel doesn't mean that it's a wheel. And just because, let's say it is a chariot wheel, like there's no maritime trade. There's no maritime trade. No boat ever sinks. Nothing ever falls off.
There's only one way that gets to like the Titanic happened. The Titanic's at the bottom of the ocean because the ocean parted and they were driving the Titanic across.
It's there is more than one way for things to get at the bottom of the sea. They're typically more conventional ways. And so, we've done this. Again, I'd say C. Eric Klein. He's done this in a very popular. Was it Eden to Exile or Eden to? He's gonna yell at me for not knowing the title of his book. I've got it on the shelf.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a lot that goes there. And someone asks about here, what's the deal with the chariot thing? Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things that
it's Ron Wyatt, isn't it?
Well, yes, but which is a whole part. But there's something that is the way this normally shows up is it's a Facebook post.
Yeah.
It's a photo, and in the moment of a thing with a text, it's able to be shared quickly. It feels snapshotty. It feels like just enough where if you're not going to ask questions, then you don't ask questions. Right. And so it aligns with what people remember about the story without having to go reread it.
Right.
They go like, oh, well, there's something about the Egyptians getting drowned.
Right.
And so, okay, that's a thing. And so if you can just touch onto one of those defining markers,
right.
It's like, how do you prove that Santa came into your house? You put some boots in front of the fireplace and sprinkle some snow around them.
Cookies.
And there you go. Like, oh, that's one of those definitive things, Santa comes through the chimney, and here's the place we're going to put evidence. So, yeah, we'll leave that one alone. I want to go back in time a little bit. Okay. We had some questions that came in before we came in. Now, in disclosure here, I think these are questions, Subala, that we are going to have to look up and come back to. So I saw your comment. Yes, we did see them. Does the Hebrew Gimel take its crookedness from the Sumerian Gam? And was the Nirgama of heaven pointed in Enki and the world order in a point of later scribal concern? So I would say off the top of our head, we will look. But there are a couple other ones, because there's also, does the tier of Tirana refer to a forest of colors in a rainbow and a bow? I mean, we do have connections between the bow and the rainbow, right? That's something that we have in the text as well.
I would say it's absolutely
a
bow.
It is God's weapon. Like, God hangs God's bow, the thing that you shoot people with.
I would say that the bow as the promise, as a symbol of the promise of, this is the promise that I will never. That the ideology there is, remember when God made His promise with Abram, and they split the animal in half, and then Abram walks between it, and then there was like a fiery pot that walks through it, or fire, and that represents God.
There's as he sees the pot of fire going through as representation of God.
And the idea is, when you make a treaty with someone, when you make a covenant with someone, you cut the animal in half, and you both walk between it. And the idea is, whoever breaks this covenant, this is what's going to happen.
It's a
you
threat
get
of
cut
violence.
in half. So God makes the bow, and they see this thing, and they go, oh, it looks like an archer's bow. And God is saying, if I ever break this covenant, basically,
may it be used on
me
or on you. Like it's if you're thinking of this in like script writing, it's the gun on the wall.
Yeah.
Like if you're watching a movie and there's a gun on a wall, it's gonna get used. You can't introduce it and it doesn't happen. And so God puts the bow up there, and it is.
So it is a weapon, but it is part of a covenant, and it's to say, if I ever do this again, if I ever flood the earth again and kill everybody, this is the vow. You look at the the Sephira Treaty is the Aramaic treaty that's just got all these curses. It just takes it to an extreme. It's got all these horrible things. It's like the Johnny Carson, the old show, when he would say, sand fleas get up in your armpits and stuff, and you just all these horrible things.
This is something that I think in the age of NIL, more people need to pay attention to when they're making contracts with coaches like Lane Kiffin, that I'm going to hang this bow up on the wall and may it be used. Not an Ole Miss fan here, but man, whew. And so, should that inform your reading of 9:13, Genesis, the bow there? I think absolutely that there is this here, and that does connect to some of these broader ideas, right? That question about languages and cultural backgrounds.
Sure.
The types of covenants that we see in the biblical record, their connections to covenants that we get other places, both between kings and people and the divine, that there is a threat of violence. Like, that's very real.
And remember, the word in Hebrew is, you don't sign a covenant and you don't say a covenant. You always cut a covenant. A covenant is always cut, whether it's blood brother or you cut a covenant in Hebrew. That's the idiom. That's the language, because something's going to die, right?
Yeah, it's the blood. And this also comes back to, like, is the life in the blood or is the life in the breath? The Bible gives us both of these perspectives, but that's an important thing. And because I also know Kipp's here, right? Yesterday, Kipp and I were reading through some of Genesis 6, going through the Hebrew there. So, go check out, if you're interested in some of the Hebrew side of what we have going on in that leading into the flood narrative, go check out Kipp Davis's channel. reading Hebrew over there. But your other questions that we can't address off the top of our head, Subala, about some of the language stuff, we will dig around a little bit.
Get some numerologists somewhere.
And if we can find a satisfactory answer to you, we will cycle back. But we do, we appreciate, one, the support, and two, the provocation to think about things that we haven't thought about before, because we are not specialists in all things and everything all at once.
That's right.
And we're happy to admit as such.
Yeah.
But the thing we can say is, I also love to send emails to people and say, I don't know this, but maybe you do. This could be an opening for some of those types of questions. Yeah. Similarly, let's throw out the regular call. If there are those kinds of questions that you're like, I've got this pressing thing I'd love to hear you talk to.
That's right.
Someone or a specific someone, if you know, let us know. It's a great way to foster conversations that are more than just, who does Jordan want to talk to? Which I love doing, by the way. I love to, but also happy to go into places that, you're like, what else is happening in this wide world of things? There's a lot that comes in all this way. Question here.
Yeah.
They did find, right, and so this is about mud bricks made without straw. They found mud bricks made without straw, wondering why they would do this to paid workers. Maybe a mix sounds like. So, yes, there are. Then this ties back to the Exodus question, Exodus, where they are told, right, as a part of the punishment, they're taking away the straw, you must go find it and do this heightening of your load without lightening the lift. That doesn't show you who made those bricks.
No, not at all. You have bricks made with straw. You have bricks made without straw. We have them in the Southwest United States.
It
doesn't mean that there was an exodus, that they came over to Arizona and made adobe bricks.
And this ties into a lot. I can't help but think of the way a channel that I do not recommend you watch, Expedition Bible, goes about presenting this kind of stuff frequently, which is like, well, look, the Bible describes something, and over here we have something that seems to match, whether it's bricks without straw, whether it's a heap of stones at Jericho, or, okay, here we have. And
therefore,
how else would the Bible have known except for it being this, which overlooks lots of other maybe more probable solutions.
Logic,
that are like, this isn't the only place. And they would know where a city gate is and what might be underneath that pile of rubble. Or maybe there are other wide ranges of ways you can make bricks, that solution... the easiest, maybe most appealing one isn't always accurate.
Correct.
If it fits every problem that you need, archaeology usually doesn't do that. So something is probably missing.
Is it possible for someone to do something two different ways? Is it possible for somebody to go, hey, we're out of straw, let's make bricks anyway?
Yeah.
Does that mean that somebody from the Bible or some Bible story made that brick? If they... not all technology came from aliens, right? Just because we have a new technology, it doesn't mean the aliens or, the Nephilim or whatever influenced it. And just because we have something that's mentioned in the Bible doesn't mean that that's evidence or proof of the thing in the Bible. I mean, that's just...
Yeah.
But again, I have to do a lot of documentaries every year to go on and say, no. Boy, Dan McClellan and I used to do a whole. We used to do this thing called no, you didn't find that, or no. It was like there was two no's in it. No,
you didn't find that.
No, you didn't find that. No, you didn't. But this was back when we were grad students, way back in the day.
Yeah, there's a.
No, that's not what happened.
That's not what that is. That's not. That's almost. It's. There is a lot that is great about archaeology in movies. Sometimes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot that's horrendous about it because it makes it look like, oh, look, you found this thing, Indiana Jones, you found this thing and look, that means this. And you're like, no, that's not how that works. It's usually almost always never how that happens. And so if you're seeing somebody say like, look, we found this thing, and then that automatically carries the water for everything about this, nope.
I love National Treasure as much as anyone. I love Dan Brown. I love Angels. I love that stuff, as the treasure hunts, as much as anyone. But I also know, Flintstones is not a documentary, right?
Whoa. Wait a minute. This is breaking news again. Yeah. John Collins, great. Flintstones, not a documentary. Iowa cold. This is where you come for the hard-hitting news, folks. If you've never heard it before, that's what we're here to do. Yeah, they're yes. There's a lot to say about that. Now, we got another question in here about a statue. Heard something about a statue being discovered with a colored cloak and 12 tomb monuments meant to be Joseph and his brothers. Any scholarship on this yet? I want to say that this came up recently. Well, one, Campbell Price, who we just talked to this week, has a new book coming out about, potential identities, not identities for Joseph, and he's going to be coming back on to talk about this. But this is also something that came up in the, what did they call it? The proto-thesis of an individual connected to the Sinai and Sinai 357, the Sinai inscriptions, the Proto-Sinaitic inscriptions there, and that this, proposed identity for Joseph. And a lot of this is in order to create, in their argument, and I want to say his name is Michael Barone, is who was doing this. We had an interview with Aaron Wilson, right? Great, talking about these as well. Go and check that out for more of a good grounding of what's happening in those. But that for them, for that proto-thesis argument, and he's not the only one that does these, he's picking up the arguments of others, that those need to be inscriptions of Moses that bear tendencies that we are going to see in later Hebrew because they are connected to the Israelites. And then, well, how are we going to have that? It's because Joseph introduced this writing system into Egypt as an administrator, which is why there's this nice transition between what we have in some of older Egyptian forms and moving down this way. And that's where this argument for this, this guy could be Joseph. And here, look, we have, again, more proof for, that's usually where this slides in, is in order to say these aren't that. You shouldn't be looking that direction for this. Instead, you should be looking the way we want you to. And Joseph is then kind of a linchpin character for saying, how are they going to be making this type of transition and creating readings that are brand new and sound completely different than what you might see? And it's because they're saying, well, we shouldn't be reading them with an eye towards Egyptian influences.
Right.
Instead, we should be looking towards the Hebrew Bible and where what else is ascribed to Moses and what Moses might have been saying here. So, yeah. But we will be coming back to that this next year.
Let me give you another way to read the Joseph story. If the Exodus is ahistorical, if there's no evidence for it, and if the Exodus is a foundation story for the origins of ancient Israel so that they aren't just Canaanites that separated themselves from other Canaanites, and if the Exodus is the story of how these Israelites who are from Canaan came out of Egypt, the Joseph novella, the Joseph story, is how they got into Egypt. So the Joseph narrative might be just as ahistorical as the Exodus. Joseph is how they got into Egypt, and the Exodus is how they got out. Both,
because we need a reason for why we're gonna
how'd they get in there?
Where we're gonna be there, right? And it is such a nice, the novella element of Joseph.
It's a beautiful story.
It's a great story as we're talking about things that sound kind of, I'm not fully saying that it's from the Persian period here, but there's things about it in the novellic features of it that you're like, this sounds a lot like in ways that reflect later literary traditions and the characterization of things, some of those descriptions that you have. Now, you got to have a good, compelling story for why. It takes up a lot of Genesis.
And he
spend it on Joseph.
He marries a nice, the daughter of a daughter of an Egyptian priest.
Yeah.
Right.
We did check out the bonus podcast episodes because we go through all of Joseph. We went through all the Genesis. You can find them. Those ones I think are all over on Patreon. If you join us on Patreon, you can get those. Favorite thing going through that I didn't know this, but when there's the whole, we know the part of the accusation of Joseph and Potiphar's wife and the back and forth there. I want to say it's Pseudo-Jonathan that adds in a fun little detail about evidence because, there's a lack of why is Potiphar going to believe this claim and do this? That Potiphar's wife used egg white to create the appearance of omission, to say, here is the evidence going forward. And so then Potiphar, then there is evidence to support this claim. And then later understands it to be egg white. And that is why he then moves and is regretful later on about what he did because he finds out it to not be the truth. But it's just like this weird, in the way Pseudo-Jonathan loves to add crazy stuff.
Potiphar's wife produced a blue dress and all of a sudden...
Yeah, there was some egg white on the dress and went before Congress, and they were like, I'm not so sure. I don't know, but crazy Venn diagram that's happening there. We're talking about Potiphar and Potiphar's wife and Joseph, and so we have these things. There are a lot of conversation happening in the chat, so trying to scrub through if I'm missing things. Love to have you here. And I think the Nephilim are still hanging around waiting for the comeback tour. We need to have a comeback tour with the Nephilim here in the next year. There's a lot of questions about SBL. If you have never been to SBL, it is a fun thing to do.
We should tell, for those of you who are not familiar, SBL is Society of Biblical Literature. It is where all of the biblical studies scholars, all the New Testament scholars, Hebrew Bible scholars, Old Testament scholars go annually for a weekend every year. They get together. They're supposed to be, sitting in papers, listening to papers, giving papers, doing the latest cutting edge research. Archaeologists are there doing things. What they're a lot of doing is networking, looking for jobs. Graduate students are going, interviewing. What we did a lot of was meeting people.
It's an interesting
eating,
way.
A lot of eating.
A lot of eating. If you love this kind of stuff, right, you can go if you are a member. So you can join SBL as a member, as like a public member, and you got to travel there to go to conferences and things. But there's a lot of interesting ideas that are coming forward. Someone asked here about a panel on Nina Livesey published a book. It's a new book about Paul's letters. I did actually go to this.
Yeah.
It's the letters of Paul in their Roman context, I want to say is the book for this. That it was an interesting response. Their arguments about what Paul did or didn't write or how. But a thing about SBL that I think, is in real time, you're seeing scholarship be presented and be critiqued and be refuted and be adapted as people present and answer questions, which if you're just seeing like the final product, like you just see the book or the journal article and you're like, oh, they just dropped this out of their brain wholesale. Not how it goes. Usually, there's a lot of back and forth and edits that happen. And that's an interesting way to see like this is what this looks like for all kinds of different people.
So I have presented a book that I have published and we've had scholars come up and review the book. So sometimes we have that, but other times I go with a new idea and I propose this idea and they accept it and I present it. And what it is it's peer review in real time. So if you go to and by the way, the American Academy of Religion has a joint meeting with them. So it's AARSBL, and it moves around the country. So they'll be in Boston one year, San Diego one year, San Antonio one year. So it might come to a city near you. But I've presented lots of papers, especially early on, where I said, here's my thesis, here's my idea. And when you're a young scholar and some senior scholar, like we were talking about John Collins earlier, comes walking in the back and listens to your paper. Oh, that's like this guy came and listened to me. And then if they ask a question and they say, hey, good job, I'm going to go turn this into an article. I want to write this into a book. And that's what it is. For young scholars, it's peer review in real time. You go talk to a scholar afterwards, you get ideas, you meet new people. So it really is a worthwhile event. Now, it costs $400 or whatever it is.
And something about it too is as you're going to sessions, as you're going to hear papers, in the same way that you should be doing when you read things that get published, you have to think critically about what they're saying. And do you agree with these parts? Do you not? Because these questions about the book about Paul. Now, I haven't read the book, The Letters of Paul in the Roman literary context, but I did go to it. And there were members on the panel who weren't in love with the thesis of the book. And there's parts of it that they're going to say, I think you're missing details here or not. It's a book I want to read before I can say more because, you hear these things and you're like, okay, and now there's a reason to read it or not. But something about this in the same way that I'd say we talked to Tom Schmidt about his new book, Josephus and Jesus, where there's parts of these things where you're like, I don't think that this is going to go over with most, but even within that, there can be elements that you're like, it's a good log to throw on the fire to make you rethink why you think what you think. And you don't have to agree with them at the end, but just because something has been a scholarly consensus for a long time doesn't mean it always should be. Sometimes there are new things emerge and you're like, oh, that solution maybe isn't fully correct anymore. Doesn't mean that everything new that comes out fixes everything, though.
That's right.
So you got to be discerning as you do that.
Yeah, and of course, I've had that happen too. I've gotten up there and given presentations, and the next presenter will come up and say, yeah, I don't agree with that at all. Mark Lucher said something really interesting. He said, the object of these papers, of these presentations, of good scholarship is not, is it correct, but is it useful?
Is it useful? Is it right? Which is even if you disagree. Even if you don't agree with them, you need to have a reason as to why. Don't just be, I don't like them.
And if it's good research, if it's good methodology, and maybe it's just a bunch of references, it's like, I don't necessarily agree with this argument, but this has helped me articulate why I don't agree with it and look at this. So it's a good article, even the things I don't agree with.
Yeah.
And I say this all the time. I like to surround myself with smart people that don't agree with me. That's iron sharpens iron. That's how peer review works. And so it's not like the polemic politics that we have today, these extremes where if you disagree with someone, you have to vilify them. SBL is a place, AAR is a place where you can go and meet scholars that you might disagree with professionally about any number of issues, but you can do that in a professional way, and then you go have a beer with somebody.
Yeah.
It's really good.
We got another question in here about the Gospel of John, which is another session that we went to, connected to two books, one by Mark Goodacre and one by James Barker, that both came out this year talking about the Gospel of John. And their question here is about John's knowledge about the other Gospels or of the other Gospels, which is something that Mark Goodacre in this one, the fourth Synoptic Gospel, is proposing a different reading than maybe you hear most places.
Right.
And Goodacre will say, this isn't something that they are coming up with all themselves.
Right.
This is something that has been thought of in the past, has been moved away from. Does John know the others? Is John synoptic? Is John not synoptic? How do we do these things? As someone comments here, at this point, a majority of scholars believe that John didn't know the synoptics, but a number of scholars who do think so is growing. Yet know or use is also different.
Yeah. So first of all, I love Mark Goodacre. I mean, I love him to death. He's one of the nicest, kindest, smartest people. We are mates. We go way back. So I'm just full disclosure. I'm a fan. Right. He turned me on Q, or, turned me away from Q. Thanks for sending along the book. And it was good to see and talk to Mark at SBL. When he first kicked this idea, when he first told me that this book was coming out, so he tells me about the stuff he's writing before it comes out. He's like, John, I got this great title.
It's a great title. It's a great title.
Very provocative.
Yeah.
And he started walking me through this years ago. I was like, what do you mean John's a synoptic? That's not what I learned growing up. He said, no. It knows about it. So unlike Matthew and Luke, when they've got a copy of Mark in front of them and they're copying word for word, John doesn't do that because it already assumes that all of the people of faith, the Christians, know that story. So it's going to supplement it with stuff that they don't know.
Yeah.
But in telling those things, it just assumes, and in the way that he says these things, you can tell that he knows that they know these stories in the way that he tells this. So it's like if you're a fanboy of you pick whatever genre, Star Wars or whatever. There are some things there's some movies, books, whatever, that you don't recommend to your friends because they're too advanced, right? There's like, don't start with this one. Start with Mark. Start with this one here. And then my dad says, I really want to get into this. And I was like, well, don't start up here. You have to watch these ones, or you have to read these ones first. John is the one that you can only read once you've read these other things, because when you read it, he assumes that you know all these other things first. That's basically the idea.
If you've got a copy of your book, or if you don't, go get one. Chapter 4, page 76, presupposing synoptic narratives, which I do think is one of the most compelling parts, where they're like, John's not explaining this part to you.
Right.
Because if you know, you know. And if you don't, you can still get through.
Right.
But if you do know, it doesn't need you to bring these things in. And also the way John, as Goodacre talks about, brings in, details and names and flushing out elements that aren't maybe so present in the synoptics. That's some of the stylistic flair of John, yes, but also ways that makes it function with those others in a new way. So it's a way that more people not everyone agrees. Again, not everyone agrees with this, but it is a different way to try to look at those conversations.
It's not a synoptic in the traditional sense that it's, line for line like Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But there's a growing number of scholars who think that John is familiar with these. I always thought, that Matthew and Luke have a copy of Mark sitting in front of them, and they're one of them's copying the other, and then John from outer space, right? Jesus coming from outer space, and it's telling stories that the others don't have. But I'm convinced now, based on Mark's scholarship, who's always so humble, he's always giving credit to everybody else who taught him, that John's familiar with these stories.
And Kipp here, a very fair point on this, that the public perception doesn't always align with what most scholars are thinking. Goodacre has received a ton of public attention for the book, as they talk about in this book, that this isn't a thing that they have come up with whole cloth.
Correct.
But that that there are both a number of ancient readers who saw John being synoptic, that scholarship maybe moved away from, and then a trend. And this is a book that, as they talk about, you can go watch our interview with them as well, that they're trying to present this in a way that is friendly to both the academic and to people that are maybe not so deep into that, providing their English translations for all their language, not bearing you with footnotes. There's materials, there's citations there, but they didn't go the full depths of it, which is something they got some criticism for, but I really love the way they did it.
And anytime you try to make a book that's accessible to more people, to a larger audience, this is the criticism you get. So, I mean, do you write a super technical book that 400 people read, but is like, the greatest cutting edge scholarship that cites everybody, half the book is footnotes? Or do you write something that people are actually going to read that's actually going to try to move the public opinion on it? And then you're going to get criticized from people who say, you forgot that. It's a good book. I recommend it. Mark's a good guy.
And Chris, your comment there, like you've read the book and you're unconvinced. I don't think that's a bad place to be.
But you learned.
It's a good thing to poke the stuff that you think, in the same way that you should read the stories. If you like the Bible, you should read the Bible, because it doesn't always say what you think it says if you read it slowly.
And as you know from watching this channel, we read everything that we disagree with. So when these guys come out and make claims, we read that stuff. We listen to that stuff. It's important it's not a know your enemy thing. It's important to understand what everybody is claiming. It sharpens your position. It makes you smarter about what it is that you believe, what you accept as true, and I don't like using the word true all the time, but what you accept as your worldview.
Yeah. We have to leave today there. So happy to have you all here with us. Thank you for all of the conversation. I will be scrubbing back through the chat afterwards. If we missed a question, we'll be coming back next Friday to do a live. We will see you here next Friday. So if I missed something here, I'll be coming back around. But happy to have you along live. If you were watching this on replay and it's not yet next Friday, whatever that day is, the 12th, you can come and join us on the 12th for another live. So we would love to see you there. In the meantime, lots of good old content that you can go and check out.
Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for being here to watch. Thank you for the comments. Thank you for all for the chatter. Again, it's always good to have you join us. Thank you, Jordan. You're doing a wonderful job with all
We're happy to be here. It's great to get to talk to people.
It's good.
Good scholars, good viewers. Lovely to have you all along. So subscribe, the regular call, wherever you find us. Go and check some things out. If you got questions, recommendations, send them our way, but we will look forward to seeing you next week. In the meantime, you can go and watch old versions of us.
That's right. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks. Go Hawks. And stay warm. See ya.